Hi, Dr. Santhip. I'm so excited about this convergence we are creating here. And it all started because actually, right after the Starship launch, so Katya and I have known each other since December 2015. We met at the Star Knowledge Conference, and we have kept in touch with each other because we both actually kind of dwell into the spirit and the science world in our own ways. Katya, you being a musician, you having a degree in the music, you're a teacher of music, you actually incorporate belly dancing and sacred geometry. And then you understand the Vedic astrology, which is like more than 50,000 years old wisdom, right? That comes from all these people who actually tap into the 0 point energy way before Tesla did or way before we are incorporating it. So it's amazing how powerful that world is. And then Dr. Santhip, I just met him briefly right before this podcast, and I'm amazed that he actually has a background as an engineer, and he's also like he's works with Katya on astrology, and they both kind of suggested that let's have a little podcast where we talk about Vedic astrology, but we talk about how it can truly help humanity in general, but also in particular when we're doing things like making a big historical events like Starship launch. And we're going to have actually many launch coming up in Artemis. I'm working on Artemis program, and it's all about going to moon, living on a moon, and then going to Mars. So we are hoping that our three of us with different background can truly bring some light to the matter that is important for humanity to understand. So Katya, please go ahead and share the intro from your perspective.
Sure. Well, Santhip and I did a webinar on April 2nd about the upcoming eclipses, right? So I took a deep dive into the sign that it was in and the star it was associated with. And we just unpacked all that material. And then a part of my research is going back in time and seeing when the eclipses were in the same sign and just looking at what world events happened. So for the solar eclipse, it's Rahu and Ketu are the terms that we use for the nodes of the moon. And Rahu is the north node and Ketu is the south node. And so an eclipse is when a shadow point is put over the earth or over the moon, right? So it's an absence of light. And even the birds stop chirping during eclipses. That's how fundamental that absence of light is. And so in Vedic culture, we say, the world is very, the veil between the worlds is very thin. And so it's best not to look at even the lunar eclipse, even though technically you can. The best thing to do is to pray, whatever that means to you. Do your mantras in Vedic or, pray in whatever tradition that you have, because that time is so intense that that little bit of effort will be amplified and will sustain you for 6 months until the next eclipse. So it's a very holy time, really eclipses are. And so you really don't want to launch things, start things, it's really, it's a day to, focus, right? And so when I saw when I saw that the rocket launch happened on the eclipse and it went down, I'm just thinking to myself, okay, you don't need to believe in astrology, to recognize that the absence of light can be critical to the psyche, and I just thought, my goodness, I wonder why, I wonder why they did that. And being friends with you, it was just like, I was in this like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I predicted that. And it happened actually on the eclipse, because I thought that it would happen this summer when Venus goes retrograde, which is July and August. Right. And because Venus also represents rockets. And why is that? Well, in Vedic astrology, Venus represents luxuries. and the kind of money it takes to get real luxuries, right? Like jet skis and yachts and rockets. I mean, look, and Venus represents billionaires, and it's only the billionaires that are getting involved with rockets. So, and when a planet goes retrograde, it's stronger, it's brighter in the sky. And so this summer, July and August, we have up until I think like September 2nd, Venus will be retrograde. And I said, oh, that'll be the time. And so I researched, what launches are happening. And I saw Falcon X I thought, oh, it's going to be Falcon X. I didn't even think to look on the day
You
of
mean
the
Falcon
eclipse.
9, right? Falcon 9 rocket, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
No,
Falcon
that's
9.
okay because SpaceX is the name of the company. But I
Yes.
want you to explain this because you said something that's interesting. So you said Venus represents the richness, right? The embodiment of material richness, like billionaire, and also technology, like rocket or anything that represents a lot of abundance in the physical world, which is what you're tapping into.
Well, it's the Venus Mars together, right? Because Venus is
Okay,
the luxury and Mars would be the technology, right? So those two coming
that is
together,
true.
it's going to be a rocket.
Because Mars is what fuels the Venus, right? In a way, and
Mars
that's
is
kind of
the propulsion,
right.
It's
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly the fire aspect of it. So when you said word retrograde, so first of all, explain retrograde in a simple English, and then explain why you believe that when it's retrograde, that's when it would have been an ideal timing for the rocket to launch.
Sure.
From your
And then
perspective.
after I explain this, I want to show you the slides with the information on it too. That way people get it in their mind, what we're talking about. Because it actually happened
Yes.
on the star of transport, El Sheraton. So
Interesting. And before you get into it, I would like Dr. Santhip to have a few minutes to introduce himself as well, and then you can get
yes.
into your slides. So that way, yeah. But
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, sure, Shehnaz. Again, thank you for inviting us to the podcast and all that. So this is a very interesting topic. As Katya mentioned, just to give a few words on this idea that normally you as astrologers, eclipses are one of the fascinating things for us, right? So it is an amazing thing that happens in the sky. And as Katya mentioned, the Vedic culture, eclipses is very, very important. They used it in many powerful ways and so forth also. So it was interesting. So and just to so as Katya mentioned, she's also going to describe a lot more on that. So like with regard to what the eclipse was and so forth and all that and so forth. So Katya and myself gave a webinar on eclipses. So I have a background in engineering. I did my PhD in mechanical engineering actually, but then I eventually went towards astrology because that just fascinated me more than engineering. Just to be blunt about it.
Wow, that says a lot, huh?
Yeah, that really says a lot. Yeah, so we can talk about that at some point. But
Yes.
I think it will be interesting for Katya to go ahead and when she shows some of the slides which we worked on together, so which she can actually explain the actual technical bits for for
Our
people
thought
to understand it
process.
more.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so retrograde.
Sure.
So retrograde means, now remember, this is from our perspective on Earth. And this is where quantum physics comes in, right? Because it's as above, so below, the quantum entanglement. This is why the sidereal zodiac is so much more powerful because it's from our perspective looking up at the night sky. Whereas in Western astrology, they use the tropical zodiac, which is the sun's gaze of the Earth. It's how the sun is looking at the earth, and that's the seasons, right? But we don't live on the sun. We live on the earth.
That's true. That's true.
So
and the perspective pretty much is the key in everything that we experience because it's all about perspective and perception, and reality is comprised of that. So therefore, it becomes important to have the right perspective.
Right. So when we're looking up, so for instance, right now we have two planets retrograde. We have Mercury and Pluto. So with Mercury retrograde, it's 3 times a year for about 3.5 weeks at a time. It's always in the same element each year. Like right now it's retrograde in Aries, which is a fire sign. So the next 2 retrogrades will be Leo and Sagittarius. Isn't that cool? But when
because of the fire, because it's going to the fire sign.
And then next year it'll be a different element.
Okay.
But when a planet is retrograde, it starts to slow down in speed. And
Okay.
so compared to the other planets. So it's like, when you're driving in a car and the other car is next to you, but it goes a little bit slower and it appears like it's going backwards.
Yeah.
That's what retrograde is. So the planet,
Interesting.
from our perspective, is going backwards when really it's just slowed down. And so when the planet is slowed down, it gets literally brighter in the night sky. So this summer, when Venus is retrograde, go outside and look at her because she's going to be brilliant, like a diamond in the sky. And Venus retrogrades will bring a lot of time, past loves and old flames will return, But with Mercury retrograde, Mercury is the planet of media, communication, siblings, writing. And, it's a pain in the butt when, it happens usually because most people don't keep up on making sure their computer's updated or, just tying up loose ends we have so much media in our world now. It's really hard to keep up on it. So when Mercury retrograde happens, a lot of people are, moan and groan because, oh no, I forgot. I mean, it even happened to me. I won't go into it, but it's been interesting. Stuff
So,
that I
I
didn't
love
know about. Oh gee, it's okay. I gotta take care of
I
that
love
thing.
I love the way you explain things. So first of all, I love what you said about retrograde because for the longest time it has been kind of has a negative connotation when you hear the word retrograde. But what you're saying actually is that that's when those planets are kind of more in our dimension, in our physical dimension for us to interact with. And actually, it's a positive thing. So even though Mercury retrograde has always been looked at as like communication barrier and we're going to run into problems, but it almost it brings more attention to what Mercury represents. That to me is pretty good. Like that's the way I would like to start looking at retrograde as like, okay, now I pay attention to this
Well, and we
planet.
can't be on the go all the time. We can't just constantly push
Exactly.
forward. We have to pull back and review what we've done before we can proceed. And that's all retrograde time periods mean is don't push forward in those areas, review what you've already done, right? And then once it goes direct, and Mercury this month will go direct May 14th.
Okay.
So if you're having problems with stuff, probably if you do your due diligence, it will clear up. But Pluto's retrograde for, gosh, I forget how many months. And he's, the last, we don't even use him in Vedic astrology, but I use the outer planets because I know they work. Because I did Western astrology before, and so I like to use them, but just in modified ways, They don't
Right.
rule signs or anything or houses or anything. But Pluto retrograde, Pluto's the power of the small, like a virus that can take you down or an atom bomb, it's secret societies, it's political organizations, it's the military, it's those hidden power is what Pluto is. So
So
we'll
it's
see
kind
a
of
lot of unraveling of these, secrets in these organizations when Pluto's retrograde.
yeah, and I feel like Pluto is kind of like to me represents the quantum physics in action because quantum physics is all about physics of small. So
Yeah, there you
right.
have it. So we could have
So
more
that's pretty cool.
emphasis because again, a retrograde planet is literally brighter in the sky. Like it's like saying, "Hey, pay attention to me. I have something to
I
say."
know.
So,
Exactly.
and the United States is going through a Pluto return right now. So it's every 248 years. Nobody sees that in a lifetime, only countries see it. And for us, it's in our second house. The United States chart, it's in the second house, which is money. It's food, right? Things we put into our mouths, things that come out of our mouths, like speech. So we're, look what's happening around us. We're transforming our monetary and financial systems.
Yes.
Banks are collapsing. Crypto's getting stronger. They're finally, the Dow Jones and crypto are finally decoupling, right? Crypto's getting stronger. Dow Jones really isn't. They just upped the interest rate again. And for me, when I look at what's happening in the United States with food, it's the predominance of chemicals. We are so chemically overladen, and everybody I know that I know personally or have seen on TikTok or whatever that, lives in Europe or Italy, they say, oh my gosh, we eat so much food, but we're losing weight because they have such strict laws on chemicals in food that we don't have here. So that's going to be a huge thing, I think, as well. But yeah, retrograde planets definitely affect our psyche, because we're on this quantum bubble, right? And that's what I tell people, like, well, how on earth can those things up there affect us? Well, our solar system is like one bubble, and we are in quantum entanglement with everything in the solar system.
That is true. Now, one thing I want to also clarify is that, we have created this huge distance between us and Earth and where everything is with respect to that, partly because we have made assumption on how everything is layered on top of each other because of the way we are explained in a school and everything. The more and more I am dwelling into the light and time show that we play in this third dimension, I'm actually realizing that nothing is really like all the way there. Everything is actually all here because, it's just the way we create separation, right, between objects. Is because that's the only way we can make sense out of things, right? So we have sky, and then we put everything like beyond the sky when we look at the solar system. And I'm actually beginning to understand that how everything is all here and is just a difference in the frequency and the vibration and the way we perceive information based on our memory and what we have learned all our lives, that we put things in perspective to make sense out of things.
Absolutely. You are spot on. So I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share. I'm just going to show you the slides briefly, of what we
perfect. Please
did.
do.
Okay. And just so this is, basically what what this solar eclipse was about. Now, this pair of eclipses, they usually come in pairs. Sometimes we have a lunar eclipse, then a solar, and then a lunar. But this time we just had a solar and then a lunar. And it's preferable in astrology to have the solar first and then the lunar. So we had that this time. And the lunar eclipse was May 5th, just a couple days ago. And it was just a penumbral one. So it wasn't particularly strong, right? So it was really about the solar eclipse this time. One second, we move this out of the way. Okay. So we had our April 20th at 12:13 a.m. EST, new moon total solar eclipse at 5 degrees of Aries, Ashwini Nakshatra. So the moon is in Aries, which is the sign of, it's the masculine, it's physical activity, it's the soldier. We say Mars, who rules Aries, is the soldier in a chart, and wherever he sits, he does battle for you. Okay, so Aries is that Martian energy. Ashwini Nakshatra, which means the horsewoman, and spans from 0 degrees to 13.2 of sidereal Aries. The symbol is a horse's head, and the deity that rules this nakshatra. Now, a nakshatra is a star. So if we take the whole actual constellation of Aries and we divide it into 2.5 parts, the brightest stars in those parts flavor those parts and tell you why one Aries is different than another. Okay. So Vedic is a star-based system. So when I say nakshatra, it means star. So the deity or god that rules it is the Ashwini Kumaras, who are the horse-headed brothers that are the sons of Sanjana and Surya. So Sanjana was the wife of Surya, who's the sun god. Surya is sun. Okay. This nakshatra is known as the physicians of the gods and is associated with healing. It's called the Star of Transport. And this was, to me, it was so ironic. I was like, not only did they launch it on an eclipse, but they launched on the Star of Transport, which is just so ironic. But the Star of Transport is the actual star El Sheraton, which is in the Horn of the Ram in the Aries constellation. It is known to be bold, blunt, and brutal. The mythology of the star is about the betrayal of Sanjana by her husband Surya. His infidelity led her to turn herself into a horse so she could run away. He chased after her, and the Ashwini kumaras were born as a result. And they are the horses that draw the sun's chariot across the sky every day. They are said, no, I just said that, ruled by the planet Ketu. So every star or every nakshatra also has a different planetary ruler. So even though Aries is ruled by Mars, Ashwini is ruled by Ketu, which is the south node of the moon. And Ketu is the planet of surrender. It's the planet of loss. It's the planet of our ancestors and, family patterns, ancestral patterns. The animal for this nakshatra is the male horse, and the Shakti or the power is the Shidra Vyapani Shakti, or the power to quickly attain goals or to quickly obtain one's objective. The result of the Shakti is that the world becomes free of diseases. And so I thought that was also auspicious, getting over this COVID pandemic, right? We've got this eclipse that's pulling us away from that pandemic finally.
Right. Not only that we're pulling away from pandemic, we are actually realizing that the whole debacle that we are on for last 2+ years was heavily exaggerated.
Yes, and manipulated. Yeah.
Exactly.
And now that Pluto's retrograde, we're going to find out a whole lot more.
Well, I'm actually very excited about that. But so when you finish, I have some questions on the slide someone like
so the sounds here are chu, che, cho, and la, and that's something I wanted to show you for the next slide, which is kind of random, but kind of not. I think it's very interesting. So this is the South Indian style zodiac wheel or square, right? The signs are always fixed. This is always Aries. This is always Libra. And so these sounds were associated with, let's see, the degree was at 5. So che was the sound associated with this eclipse. And what does that mean? Well, it means that, for instance, in mundane astrology, companies or brands that start with those letters or have those letters prominent in them will be affected more by the eclipse. If your name has this, if your street, your country, those sounds are activated when things go into that part of the zodiac. And every sound is associated with a frequency, right? Like every musical note is associated with is a frequency. And so that's how this is important.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So if you can take a little pause. So the slide that you showed earlier, where you showed about April 20th eclipse, right? The whole storyline there, and then the ultimate bottom line sound that emerges from all that information, right? Which you showed it in your previous slide. My question to you is that what is the science in determining those sound contributing to that April 20th event in a simple way?
How did they figure that out? How did they figure out the sounds? Well, from what I understand, again, this is 50,000 plus years ago, right? And I'll have Santhip say something in a minute. But what I do know from chanting mantras is that your vocal cords have different nerves that go to different chakras. And the chakras are the glandular system. And so the ancient priests in India, just by observation, noticed that their devotees, when they chanted certain sounds, it activated certain body parts. And that's just observation. And so that's why when we tell you to chant your mantras, we're not saying it, lightly. It's because it literally activates those nerves in your vocal cords, which open up the chakras.
Okay, and can you go back to that slide, please, while you're talking, because I wanted to see that again, because that is pretty amazing. So you're saying that, okay, so all of these letters that are, this is like a chart that covers all the possible sound for the eclipses. I mean, what should I say this chart represents
So,
in
okay,
a simple?
how do you use it? Well, how I would use it, like for instance, my yogi point, which is a calculation. We won't go into it, but
Right.
the yogi point in a chart is how you hold on to wealth. Okay? If you have a connection between your second house and your 11th house somehow, that's called a Dana yoga. That means potential for wealth. But people with Dana yogas aren't always wealthy. It's that's how it came to them. But what
There's
do
a
they do?
potential. Right.
Right. So my yogi point, my potential to hold on to wealth is here in the sound DO. What crypto coin do you think I invested in? Dogecoin.
Oh,
You see,
wow.
that's
So
how you
basically by
use
knowing,
it. Yeah.
so if somebody wants to learn this and how to use it, what is the, like Hoda, what does Hoda mean, by the way?
Okay, Santhip, this is where you take over.
Because I'm really
Yes.
curious since you're showing something, and of course,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
won't be covering deep
Yeah,
dive
so
into it, but
the Hoda chakra is basically, they just call the sound distribution as a Hoda chakra. Chakra is a wheel, Hoda is a
right.
sound actually. So sound bit, it is the name meaning. Now the sounds you see here is basically the sounds they found aligning with the aligning with the universe. So for instance, let me explain it in a simpler fashion. So I think Katya explained how the rishis or the great saints in India, how they discover the effect of different mantras with their body parts and so forth. Now, astrology is the science of the universe in which the macrocosm exists within the microcosm and vice versa, right? So the sounds that are actually stimulating certain body parts or stimulating certain chakras, to be precise, can be linked with certain celestial phenomena, is the foundation for this thing. So when you get into deep meditation, when you chant these mantras, you begin to see these vibrations stimulating certain specific aspects of your consciousness. So let's put it
Wow.
this way. So when you chant some of these mantras, you will see that is actually stimulating the heart chakra. You suddenly feel more loving, more giving, and so forth. And the mantra and the sound could be stimulating your willpower chakra. You feel like driven, you want to go work out, stuff like that. So that's so the sounds are intricately linked with the chakras actually. And this is one of those ways. This is one of those ways how they derive the sounds for the nakshatras, as it's called, or the lunar mansions or the stars, as Katya explained. So so it's like a deep science actually. So we are talking of an aspect which is having a more practical implication in this day and age, like how Katya easily explained by identifying the sound. Now, the sound aspect is a deeper science, more than astrology. It's a mantra shastra, which is a different kind of science completely. It has a deeper aspect to it. There's a whole other level to it. I mean, it can take lifetimes to get deep into it actually. That's how powerful it is. But within that, so you can see this particular aspect where certain stars in the sky has been linked with certain sounds. So when events are happening at certain stars, those sounds or people who carry that energy of the sound or institutions or organizations linked with that particular sound will go through a transformation. So it's a very powerful system actually. Now, if anyone whose name was Chu, Che, Cho, or La, so if you know any Larry, for instance, if you know any Choi, for instance, they might have gone through a tough time just because they had an eclipse happening in these sound part of the stars and so forth actually. So similar.
Because and even it can show up in any part of their name, right? Even if it's in the middle,
Yes,
even if
that's
it
correct.
depends on it, right? It can.
That is correct. Exactly correct. So exactly correct.
So this chart, does it cover all the possible sound that is encompassing?
There are some sounds that are missing. So for instance, the sha sound, the sha sa sa ha variation. In Sanskrit there are 51 or 51 letters or so, and so there are a couple of sounds that are missing here. But majority of them is covered actually. You could say almost 90% of the sound is covered. That you could say.
Yeah. Can I make an observation?
Yeah.
So guess who just got coronated? Prince Charles, which is here.
Right.
And
Oh,
Jupiter,
yeah, that's true. Right.
Jupiter is now in Aries. Jupiter is in Chu, but I believe when when his mom died, when they were preparing for the coronation, Jupiter was in Pisces here.
Right.
So,
So when
just look
Prince
around
Charles
you.
is getting, that's correct. So when Prince Charles is getting coronated, all the Charles in the world will be having a good time as well. Similar to that. So you can look into that. That kind of thing is a very powerful thing, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And we
You
just
can
had,
do more of that.
22. So the lunar eclipse was this sound, TI.
Yeah. So yeah.
So it's
So
very
sound,
deep,
yeah.
but it's also a way,
Wow.
like if you're starting a company, right?
Right.
You want to, obviously pick a name that is congruent with the sounds and how it lines up in your chart and whoever
Right.
else is in the company. And that's how you use it, just, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah, because
So,
I'm looking at this SO because my company name is Ashwini Sona, and SO is part of my last name as well because my last name is Soni, right? So when I looked at the SO, and of course, I'm like, okay, I need to know like how does that affect me, whether positively or negatively? Like when you see the one that's right after Da.
SO is actually going to have some tough time at least next year because Saturn is moving
Saturn's
close to
here.
So sound.
Saturn's in
But
Aquarius right now.
yeah. However, the good thing is that it's like nothing that you're not used to yet as this. So you could see that. So it's almost like you'll have to be disciplined with how you're doing because Saturn is a planet to discipline actually. As long as you're disciplined and so forth, things will be fine, is what they say actually. Because Saturn is the planet that wants you to suffer first so that you can enjoy the rewards later on and so forth actually.
Yeah,
Right.
and I've got yeah, and Katya knows I've gone through so many of those that hopefully I've gotten good at it.
But an observation I'd like
Yeah.
to make, though, is Saturn in Aquarius is the AI revolution, right? It's leveling up in technology. And here you are a rocket scientist. So you are going to be in a main focus for this new technical transformation.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
speaking about AI, the famous chat GPT, look at the sound
Yes.
cha. So Charles got coronated around the same time chat GPT became famous also. Cha sound became famous. People who have the
Wow.
cha sound is great. So you can see that play out. So sound is a very powerful thing actually. You can do
And
more things with this and so forth.
And sounds override language because this applies to every language.
Exactly. No, I completely agree with that. That's why to me this is a universal tool because it's regardless of what language you speak, as long as you carry that essence, right? Because it's the sound. So it doesn't matter the language. So yeah, no, I am very much excited about this. And I think we're gonna have to probably do something where we can go deep dive into this because
Yeah,
this is
absolutely. Yeah, I know. I love it too. I only learned it a couple years ago. So,
oh
okay.
wow.
So these are the Ashwini kumaras.
Beautiful.
Drawing the horse chariot across the sky. So this is how it plays out in somebody's birth chart, right? In a birth chart, Ashwini as the ascendant, which is the first house, the moon,
Right.
or the sun. Those three things, we call it the Sudarshan chart. And you should always look at a chart from all those three perspectives. But it indicates somebody who's a pioneer. These people are the heroes, and many will join the military or become explorers in their field. These people are very impatient and do not like to slow down. And as a result, they get a lot of traffic tickets. There's a tendency to have racing brain syndrome, ADHD, and stuttering may be a problem because their mouth cannot keep up with their mind. It's like their mind is racing so fast they can't get the words out, right? And so
My
stuttering.
God, I feel like you're talking about me, man. Okay, continue.
As Aries is the infant in the zodiac, these people can wail like a baby if they don't get what they want. As healers, these people will treat the elite for their health, and you will often find them in a medical setting somewhere, or as an engineer designing cars or rockets. Aromatherapy remedies for Mars and Ketu are the spices, anything in the spice family, and the roots. So clove, cinnamon, ginger, vanilla. And vanilla is great for the hair. The hair is associated with the planet Ketu because Ketu is headless. And so focusing on, your hair actually is a good remedy for Ketu. And lotus, because lotus, is all about the roots. And the roots are associated with Ketu. Also, Venus cancels the debilitation of Mars, and Venus rules all flowers. So rose is an excellent remedy for this nakshatra, as it calms anger and helps with the heart. So if you have any kind of Mars problems in your chart, just taking some rose essential oil or perfume and putting it on your heart chakra really helps the anger, helps, because a lot of times anger is just sadness in a different form, right? And so healing the emotions is a great way to remedy Mars.
Right. And to me, anger is just a trigger that gets set up because of, because of certain things that you didn't process as gracefully as you wanted to. And
Yeah.
when you understand the, root cause, of course, then you can help yourself. But these are very good examples. So for all the people who are listening here, the fact that if they want to know whether they fall in this category, you just said in the very top, right? That either their moon or the sun or their rising, if it falls in Aries,
If
then
it falls
all
in
of these apply.
Ashwini, yeah. If it falls in
Ashwini.
Ashwini, yeah, right.
Falls in Ashwini. Okay, because right now I can relate to all of this. Like I feel it.
Okay. Well, this is where the eclipse went. It really affected Australia, and Indonesia. And when I looked in the news, I noticed that for years, Australia owns property in Indonesia and has been mining there. But because of all the mining, they've had these horrible floods taking out villages and stuff. And that was a big focal point during the eclipse, I noticed. Because wherever the eclipse goes over, that area of the world, it will be stronger. The effects of the eclipse will be stronger. So like next year, we have one going from Texas over the West Coast. And then, I'm sorry, this fall, we have that. And then next April, we have one going from Texas over my house in Indiana.
Yes, 2024. Yeah, you
So I'm
told
going
me
to be
about
inside under the covers going, no.
it.
Everybody sets up their cameras and they go outside and they're like,
Right.
blah, blah. And then look at what happened since 2017 when we
Yes.
had, it's like things just amplify. So,
Yes.
we don't need to go over the star, but this is the fixed star El Sheraton. For people that are viewing it, you can take a screenshot of this if you want and dive deeper into it. But the fixed star is what the nakshatra is all about. And this is where I've been doing some deeper research because the nakshatras only include the brightest stars along the ecliptic. And the ecliptic is the path that the planets follow in the sky, right? It's called a yogatara when you have a fixed star with a planet. But there are millions, countless other stars, right? And from our perspective on Earth, it's obviously the brightest stars. So for instance, Arcturus is actually far off the ecliptic, but it's included in the nakshatras because it's so bright and it's so important. And it's known as the self-going star, the independent one, the one that's away from the ecliptic, right? So, the star, it's all about the stars. So we won't go too far into that. But this is where this is El Sheraton and this is Mesarthim. These two are often associated with each other. It's in the horns of the ram. Okay, so this is what it actually looks like. So I think that's important, like to know that's where it is. And when I was doing this research, Venus was exactly conjunct El Sheraton, and that is what we call a nimitta or an omen. It was like, oh, Venus is going to be kind of the star of this eclipse, even though it's not in her sign. It's not even in her nakshatra. But here she is, right with El Sheraton when I'm doing the research, and that is a sign. So I knew Venus was going to be important. And as we said, Venus is rockets.
Okay.
All right, now to the meat of it, right? So this is, the eclipses are, they go for 18 and a half months, right? So it's like a little over a year and a half that Rahu and Ketu will stay in the same sign. And so you have a couple eclipses, right? Like 3 or 4. And so the Aries themes are protection, the military, war, destruction, sports, and terrorist attacks. The Libra themes are music, the arts, higher knowledge, and relationships, romance. And like I said, Venus, right, is luxuries. So things concerning luxuries. So I went back in time, and the last eclipse that we had was in this sign in Aries was 2004. And there was another huge tornado in Mississippi. Now, I know they have tornadoes down there all the time, but the recent one that we had was particularly catastrophic. And the last time it was this catastrophic was 18 and a half years ago. So I thought that was significant. There was a big earthquake in Afghanistan, Pakistan then. And then Google introduces Gmail, Mars. This is more of a Saturn and Aquarius thing, I thought, but pioneering stuff, right? Pioneering thing. So those were really the biggest things. And then, excuse me, then I got to 1985, and Challenger moves to launch pad and then launches on April 29th, only to crash and kill. So I had this a little bit wrong. When I looked up the Challenger crash, it pointed me to the 1985 malfunction. And I had a friend of mine say, Katie, the crash was January 28th, 1986. And so the link between the two was that the Challenger one that left on April 29th did not have passengers, but it had technical problems, and they didn't get them fixed up. So by the time 1986 rolled around, we had a crash. So that's the link between that eclipse and the crash. Okay. And I just wrote this out. I said, it worries me because Venus retrograde represents how SpaceX operates by developing a fully reusable super heavy lift launch system known as a Starship, a Venus retrograde theme of return. That's supposed to say of return. So yeah, I thought this summer Venus retrograde is happening. Surely that's going to be when we're going to have problems. So I looked at the launches that were happening this summer. And so I saw that July 17th, the new moon will arrive at 2:32 p.m. EDT. It's the third quarter, and there's going to be a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket that will launch the Euclid mission for the European Space Agency. Euclid aims to learn more about the parts of the universe we can't see, specifically dark energy and dark matter. And so I just went through and I wrote down, also scheduled to launch in July from Spaceflight Now. Oh, I already wrote that. Yeah. So I thought surely it's going to be this. That's going to be the one, right? I really didn't think it was going to be on the eclipse. And then I just went back over, we don't have to go over this part. This was 1947. So we're going back in time when the eclipse was in Aries. It's very significant things happening. And especially in 47, we had the Roswell. So we were still sifting through that during the eclipse in 48. And I think that's going to be, aliens and ET are going to be a massive theme right now because Saturn's in Aquarius. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then Santhip said, well, I want you to look at, and then we had the Great Depression, and let's look what's going on with these banks. They're collapsing. We've got this financial mess right now. And this side on the right, this is the North Indian style. Some people prefer that. So we don't have to go over this, but this is the one where we had the Rahu Ketu cycle aligning with Jupiter. So Santhip, do you want to say a little bit about how you suggested I look at that?
Right. So remember what Katya has been showing right now is that she was going through when was the last time these planets were at that same position? So, and we identified, like she mentioned, the Great Depression happened when the north node of the moon was linking with Aries and so forth. So of course, that was the two planets in Vedic astrology, or two grahas as they're called, the north node of the moon and the south node of the moon. So looking at the same position, she was kind of showing them actually. But what I suggested was that, since Rahu Ketu with the planets which she just mentioned has this it has and they are called as a node. So nodes have a typical cycle of 18 years. You can say 18.5 years. And there are very certain interesting natural phenomena that happen around 18.5 years and so forth, actually, and all that. Now, we have another graha and the planet, which is Jupiter. And Jupiter actually has a cycle of 12 years, actually. So that is the entire Jupiteran cycle. So then it was just simple mathematics to identify when is the, I think it's called a lowest common multiple or something like that. So when is the time you get the, when is those cycles coming together at the same time? So of course, two times the nodal cycle, which is twice the 18 years, is 36 years, and 3 times the Jupiteran cycle was actually going to be, the a time when you would get Jupiter also in a similar position, so forth. So close to that time period is when you could identify some very interesting themes. So I thought that was very interesting, actually. So I asked her to look into that. So turns out around that time or close to the vicinity of that time when those 2 cycles were going on, I think she found the Challenger crash happening around that time. So again, when two cycles of planets are again repeating again and again, you can see similar kind of patterns happening. So in general, in astrology, we do say 18 years you become an adult. The next 18 years you become like a real mature adult of sorts. That's when Saturn matures and so forth, and so forth, actually. So something happening similar with the planets also is what you see here. So that's what I recommended. That's why I recommended Katya to look at that particular years, actually. And you can see that she actually found, so you can see the chart on the right is actually having Jupiter in 29 degrees of Pisces. The chart on the left is actually not having the same Jupiter in position, but Jupiter is close to that, actually. And I think she was looking at the 1985 disaster of Challenger, actually. And 1986 is also different. Now, anyway, it was interesting, but she just found that the Challenger disaster happened close to that time period and so forth. So, which was interesting. So you could see that actually she have the, yeah, go ahead, Katya. You can
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, yeah, so you see the eclipse was April 20th, and then 9 days later they launched, I forget which, it must have been Challenger, 13 or 14 or something. I forget, but it's the one that had the technical problems, launched 9 days after the eclipse. And then the following January, we had the crash. I remember that day. That was traumatic, 1986. I was 15. Yeah. And I think they had us, like, they turned on the TVs at school. Like, we all gathered around and we're just watching the launch, right? So we're all gathered around watching it. And when it crashed, it was just so devastating. And so when I saw this, my heart just went, boom. So, Shehnaz, can you tell us some technical things about the Starship launch and how it's different? Because I know that it's supposed to be the biggest rocket yet. Is that, I'm ignorant of that aspect.
For the Starship, yeah, it is one of the heaviest rocket, heavier than even the space launch system that we launched, in 2021. So this is, and then the whole thing about Starship and the reason it's such a big deal is because of the reusability, as you mentioned in your charts. And we actually, and I know we're still troubleshooting exactly what the cause of, the explosion. But the thing is that the fact that the flight termination system kicked in when the booster did not separate, that part was actually, we were very pleased about, because if it wouldn't have done at the right timing, it could have created a big catastrophe because it was very close to towns, right? I mean, it would have cost human life. So I think considering everything, I mean, even though it was an explosion, but the fact that everything worked based on what was expected when the booster doesn't separate, that part was good. I mean, right from the get-go, all the Raptors did not come online. There were 33 Raptors. So we already knew that it wasn't going as perfect as expected. But that is what I've been told, by NASA and the peers, that the only goal was to get it to launch. And then the fact that I think it went like about 39 kilometers and then it, did not separate and then it exploded. All of that, they're saying that everything after taking off was like icing on the cake, right? So it was kind of like, okay, whatever more it can do, we can take some credit for success.
Right.
And yeah, so the thing about this Starship is that ultimately it's going to be used. That's going to be the actual vehicle that's going to rendezvous with the SLS rocket with the Orion capsule on it, with the astronaut inside it at the non-rectilinear halo orbit, which is basically lunar orbit. And then it's going to pick up the astronaut from the Orion capsule to Starship. And the Starship is the only vehicle that's going to go all the way to the surface of the dark side of the moon. And that's what we were anticipating to do it in 2024 when we had signed this entire Artemis project under Donald Trump, by the way. And because of the fact that so much has happened since then, and every time NASA has to, of course, get the budget from the Congress, and then that depends on the presidential, campaign and their decision making. So therefore, right now we are anticipating it getting kind of moving to the right, most probably 2025, 2026, when we do really go to the moon and live on the moon for 1 week.
Right. So I would just say that, it's amazing that you have been working on it. I mean, really, like that. Thank you so much for, serving humanity like this. It's amazing. But now that we know what, that this is lining up with 1985, just know you've got to be extra careful about these things, because this pattern, because what you do with your spiritual work is bust patterns, right? And so this is a pattern showing up that we've got to bust. We don't want to bust the rocket. We want to bust the pattern, And I will say also that cryptocurrency took a massive nosedive when that thing exploded. So it's not just,
Because
it affects everything, like when something goes wrong, the markets just tank. And that's,
because you just said, remember, everything is interconnected. So the thing is that whatever happens, and of course, majority of the people, when they saw the explosion, they looked at it as a very negative event, and people take it very personally, whatever happens to them, even if it's a global event. So at the end of the day, it affects the way the morale of the people is, and ultimately it trickles down in all aspects, because fear. I mean, that's why so many organization feeds off of your fear, because they spread the fear and then you buy into it, and then it just completely becomes a big problem, right? So I think one of the thing is that I know we took a deep dive into your world, right? The world that you both are familiar with. And for me, I was barely keeping up with it, because it seems like it's another school of thought, right? It's a whole different way of thinking. So I think for the people that are listening who are more like me and not as involved with the astrology as you guys are, my question is that how do we raise the awareness so we can use this ancient wisdom, Vedic astrology, and converge it with everything that we want to do for human evolution going forward in the way that, because, to me, it's time that everybody is not playing in their own sandbox. Everybody's playing where we're all converging with whatever we have learned, because there's a reason you guys have been diving into this knowledge, because that was your calling and you have done a good job. You understand it. But I think now it's time that how do we start interacting with people who don't know it, but give them enough so that they can leverage off of that information and hopefully do something good with it.
Right. Well, to me, it's all observation, like just how the rishis observed their devotees when they were chanting, oh, gee, this body part's healing. You've had this problem, but you're doing this sound, and now this problem is better, right? It's how we, as an herbalist, because I'm an herbalist, and how do we know how herbs react? Well, we watch the animals. This is how our ancestors learned. They watched what animals ate, what they didn't eat, and they started to learn that way. How did we give meaning to the zodiac signs and the nakshatras? It's not like we forced these myths on the sky. It came from observation. Oh, gee, when the Pleiades is high in the sky in April, it always rains. So associating the Pleiades with the Weeping Sisters, which is what they're known as. It's all observation. And so how do you see the nakshatras in the modern world? There's a wonderful creator on YouTube. I love her videos, Claire Nakti. She does the most amazing research on the nakshatras, and she uses modern film So she gets these movies and she says, okay, we're going to talk about, Ashwini Nakshatra and how it plays out in the modern world for men and women. And she grabs these clips from these movies and you can't take your eyes off. I mean, it's so fascinating. And the way she explains it, it's everywhere. It's all around you. It's operating at every level. And as an herbalist, I've realized that, I work with the plant families, and I've noticed that certain plant families align with certain planets. They treat certain planets. They're like carrying that frequency. And so if you just I think the most fundamental thing you can do is learn what the planets' meanings are, learn what the nakshatras are. Just start there. Start with the stories. See how they play out around you in your family, in your friends, and you're going to catch on. You're going to see it's all a play of light and shadow, and that's really the best way, I think. What do you think, Santhip?
Yeah, no, Katya actually gave it exposed it beautifully, actually. Now, of course, I'll take some time on explaining this just so that it can be cleared up, So the modern day world, you tend to isolate yourself from your surroundings and so forth. You have an independent existence and so forth. That's the get-go. That's the fundamental perspective from where we are functioning. But the moment you start to extend that link, then immediately our linkages with families, your children, your parents, or whosoever is closest to you, or your loved ones, your partner, husband, wife, and so forth. But then you can further extend that forward also, right? So you can extend the linkage to your grandparents, your grandmothers, or even to your grandchildren and so forth, and all that. Now, when you further extend it, the next level is going to be your neighbor, your community person, your PT, the PTA president or whatnot, your bus driver, your Uber driver, whatever, right? So things like that. So we are already living in an interconnected world, actually. We are already part of a very strong interconnected world. But one thing even happening, like Katya made a very interesting observation that when the spaceship rocket exploded, like the whole cryptocurrency went down, right? So who would have expected that kind of linkage? But in reality, we are already in a linked world, actually. It's a very important aspect to recognize. And nature has already designed this world in which we are already in sync with the seasons and with the stars and movements and so forth, actually. So when it's summertime, we feel like going out. When it's wintertime, we feel like being inside, actually. So what's there to say? So with astrology or with Jyotish, we are actually trying to awaken this consciousness aspect within ourselves so that we can connect with that fundamental force of nature that is already out there, actually. And when you begin to connect with those natural aspects, immediately you start to connect with the life around you in a much more deeper way. It's not only going to be like your loved ones and your people in your family and so forth. It will actually be extended to the animals. It will be actually be extended to plants, to the trees around. So, for instance, I have astrology students of astrology. They have to, one of the exercises I tell them is like, go around their home, identify what are the trees around your home, and try to identify that from your chart. You can do that. Find out what are the animals that are in your neighborhood from your chart. What kind of animals show up in your home? What kind of birds show up in your home? And you can make prediction based on that. So, for instance, in ancient China, if you are walking past a house of a scholar, you are more likely to see bamboo trees coming from the house of a scholar, because bamboo was used to actually write down about the, bamboo was used to make the pen in that day and age. But whereas you are in a house of, if you're passing by the house of a warrior, it is much more likely to see that you might find a weapon, a tree that was used to make weapons very prominent there and so forth, actually. So what you can actually see is that someone carrying a particular consciousness that consciousness will be reflected around you one way or the other. So in ancient times, it could be easily be seen with the families, with your homes and so forth. But that effect of fundamental aspect of natural consciousness frequency is within us, can always be accessed and can always be employed also. Now, to make it practical, I actually would encourage to focus on developing the sense of connected consciousness, actually. So don't separate yourself from the creature that is in front of you. Don't separate yourself from the family member who's in front of you. They might have their own journeys to go through, but you might have your own journeys as well. The moment when you begin to expand this consciousness, when you begin to remove this separation aspect, now you can actually begin to develop not just a consciousness aspect, your life improves, but you are actually beginning to understand this holistic perspective, which is the fundamental perspective utilized for astrology. So I think one last sentence I would like to say is that definitely one big thing you have to know in astrology is that I like to say that astrology or Jyotish is actually, it's not just the study of grahas or planets or stars and so forth. It's actually a holographic science of consciousness that you are actually studying. When we approach it that way, suddenly you are connected with the entire universe, and you can actually be improving your own consciousness at that point of perspective. And that's a very, very fundamental change that needs to be put in place also. But so it's a
Right.
tough ask actually, but it is a process, and like all process, it will take time to get efficient and so forth.
Yeah, no, I think that completely makes sense. And it's funny because, we all have our own way of comprehending the universe around us, because as above, so below. And there's so many ways to approach that perspective, right? Like for me, I look at everything from many different ways, not astrological ways, but I have my own methodology. And so I think for people who gravitate towards the astrology as a gauge, as a tool, then they can really embed that in their world, because astrology helps you connect the Milky Ways and the galaxy and the star and the moon and everything with your day-to-day life. So that actually brings everything home to you. So you don't see that, okay, the moon is over there and I'm here and we have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Because that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, and there's a Native American word for this called Watiko, and it's the last share I want to show you, but I feel like it's important. And I want to show the book where people can read about it. So Watiko is the virus of selfishness, according to Native Americans. According to them, Watiko is an evil spirit that invades human minds. It's a virus of selfishness, a physic pathogen forcing the victim to feed their insatiable needs as if they were starving. It makes humanity become its own worst enemy. This interesting yet unsettling view comes from a piece of literature we think everyone should read. Paul Levy is an admirer of Carl Jung's legacy and a regular columnist for The Guardian. He wrote a literary piece entitled Dispelling Watiko that deserves reflection. Levy says that we live in an era where most psychosocial phenomena proves the existence of a virus of selfishness. And here is the actual book. I think I have mine's on Kindle, and so it's on Amazon too. But how to break free from the collective mind parasite of Watiko. And honestly, every single community I've ever been in is infected with this. It's absolutely phenomenal when I think about it. So this explores how Watiko covertly operates both out in the world and within our minds, and how it underlies every form of self-destruction, both individual and collective. Reveals how Watiko's power lies in our blindness to it, and examines how people across the ages have symbolized Watiko to help see it and heal it. Examines the concept of Watiko as it appears in the teachings of the Kabbalah, the Hawaiian kahuna shamanism, mystical Christianity, and the work of C.G. Jung. So yeah, you can read about it, but it's the cancer of the mind, really. It's the sentiment that you are above cosmic law.
Okay.
Right? Like nobody's above human law, but no one's also above cosmic law. And I was listening to this interview yesterday of Alan Anand, who is an incredible author. I think he's my favorite author in Jyotish. But he said, people pray from their desires. They pray to God, oh, God, please give me this, give me that. And when they don't get it, they get upset. Well, it's God's plan. It's not your plan. And just because you've prostrated to God, he's under no obligation to give you a cookie.
I know, but you know what? So I'm going to take it to a different level. So I have my book, The Quantum Being. If you read the chapter 6 in the book, you're going to understand that how every single thing that you are surrounded by is the gauge for your frequency and vibration, right? So it's not like that, you can ask for anything you want, but we are moving we are a moving electron. So it's all a dance of frequency and vibration. So at the end of the day, whatever you want, if you're not aligning with it 100% in all layers of your existence, then you're not going to be experiencing it. It has nothing to do with whether God is giving you or God is not. At the end of the day, it's a dance you have to play along with everything else, right? So when people don't see that they are the one who are conduit on everything they want to create in their life, then how are they going to really create that in their life, right? So it's
Right,
not like,
it's
like you're the universe. You're the universe seeking to understand yourself. So we are kind of a glue to everything that we're experiencing. So it's not like one or the other, because, you know, it's like Dr. Santhip, you mentioned earlier that the key thing is that people need to understand that we are all interconnected. There isn't any separation. So when you focus on that, then to me, that's, for me, I always kind of focus on things where we can go home rather than bickering about something that we didn't understand or we didn't pay attention to, because then you're putting energy into that. You see my point? So it's kind of like helps when you have the mindset of like, how are we going to bring it home to me? And it has to work with not just you, with everybody else, because we're all connected. So it's not like, you know, Katya, if you want something that can affect me also, then we both have to make sure that we are affected in the right way to attract that, whatever
right,
that is.
right. Where attention goes, energy flows.
Exactly. So yeah, so this is actually interesting. So yeah, I think I learned that there's this deeper science about Vedic astrology that I truly don't understand, and I have more questions than not. But you guys have done incredible amount of work to speak the language that you do. And ultimately, anybody who wants to learn this or understand that so that they can help make their life better, then they should contact you. So, Katya, what is the best way to contact you?
This is my
Yes.
new book, and if you want to learn about astrological aromatherapy and how to see the world around you through the plant families, this is your book. And also, I have my
Perfect.
recipes in the back for how to use essential oils, because it's so most everybody loves perfume, loves things that smell good, and just by what you're attracted to, that tells me everything about what's going on in your chart, what planets are being activated. And so there's so many avenues of how we can see this play out in our lives, you know, that it's just it's not as hard as people think it is. And I think that's part of why they get shied away from this kind of material. I think it might be too difficult, but it's not really.
I mean, I think if we start teaching in our schools all the fundamental of all of these different concepts, that way people have at least some idea, and then they can go further down in the study if they want to. That would open the door for a lot of things, right? And even, you know, I mean, so that's where we are. And I think as we're creating this new earth and new way of living, we will start having these type of things as part of the school curriculum, where people can have a choice if they want to become astrologers. So not like Dr. Santhip, who had to become an engineer and then realized that, oh, my calling is actually more to be an astrologer, right? Because it's like you should have a choice to have this and be useful. And to me, you guys should be working with meteorologists and all these people who are doing weather prediction and so forth.
Well, yeah, you know, it's so funny. One of my dear friends and former dancers of mine is now the president of the American Meteorological Society. And
Oh, that's good.
it's yes, but you know, it's you know, baby steps. You know, it's baby steps with the hardcore scientists, because they've been taught not to have anything to do with astrology, and that's something that we have to start undoing, because as you know, with you know your family and everything going on, we have a whole new group of autistic children that are going to be in the workforce soon, and they have a very different way of seeing the world, seeing things whole. Even Richard Branson has started this, it's like the benefits of dyslexic thinking. Like he says it's a superpower because dyslexic people can see things from different points of view. And
Exactly.
so you know, this is what's going to be happening with the future generations, and we're, you know, at the forefront of breaking down these old paradigms. So
100% agree. I have a son who is autistic and he's actually becoming a meteorologist. And I'm very excited about him because he understands the weather differently than anybody I've seen. And I mean, he already knows how to predict weather, but he has to have the degree so people can actually avail him in the right jobs. So that's why I'm helping him get a degree so he can be in the right place based on his
Well,
credentials.
he is so lucky to have you as a mother. I mean, really, it was, definitely destiny. Because we need women like you, and me who, are strong and can push these issues forward and not just sink back into what's comfortable,
Exactly. And men like Dr. Santhip, who knows that I need to do what is my calling and not do what the society dictates you to do, because after engineering degree, not availing that requires the courage for you to go in a path that you went,
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's
yeah,
not
so
easy for sure. That I can say for sure, but ultimately, as you correctly said, Shehnaz ji, that as you actually uh, become aligned with your frequencies and so forth and all that, things do fall into place actually, and you'll be surprised when that falls into place. So as long as one is doing that, and then you have the opportunity to take it forward, then you'll see things just growing actually. It will be an organic growth, and you'll be like, why was I worried about these kind of things in the first place? Simple as that, actually.
Right. And I love when you mentioned the word holographic science in the Vedic astrology, because I actually see how holographically everything we create, just the way we process information. And I actually have a class on that. And you guys may want to join me if you like, because basically that class, I explained the science because I stumble onto the declassified CIA paper that shows how we are projecting our reality back to ourselves. So when we understand that at the deeper level, and it's just the way our brain processes information, and it processes the light and time, right? And the Walter Russell explained that very well too. So I explain all that in my class. And I definitely would love for both of you to join me so that you can give me your input. But that's the type of conversation we need to start having so we can all start converging what we know, because we all know a little bit, but not all of it. And when we work together, we can start uncovering things that has been hidden, and it's time that it gets revealed to all of us. So yeah, I'm grateful that we had this convergence for today. And and I'm sure more to come later. But
Thank you
you,
so
Dr.
much,
Sandeep.
Shehnaz. It's
Thank you.
been a
Thank you,
pleasure,
Shehnaz.
and I'm just, so happy that you are, brave enough to bring these issues forward and be a catalyst for change. So you're a blessing.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
of course,
Thank you.
yeah, and you can find about Katya through her website. I think, what is your website, Katya?
HindustanAstrology.com. And there's, you can message me there. My consultations and shop, everything's there. And then Santhip, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so it will be tough to find me. I'm not as active on social media that much, but still, if you can find my email, Dr. Kanholly, DRKANHOLY @gmail.com. That's one way. You can find me on Instagram also with the same name, Dr. Santhip Kanholly. If you find me on Instagram, just message me there actually. So though I'm not as active, because I prefer to do more research actually, but then I'll be happy to respond to emails or something like that. Only completely fine.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, see you later.
Thank you. Yeah, bye. Yeah.